I do sometimes sense that there's a reluctance to preach about justice from the pulpit for a number of reasons. For some, especially of an older generation, there's this concern that that's bringing politics into the pulpit or partisan political concerns. And of course, justice, biblical justice, can be manipulated for those purposes, and that is irresponsible. But the idea that the Bible would be so chock full of God's teaching about justice, and then we would not teach about it from the pulpit just because it can be done badly, doesn't seem to make sense. It's a priority of God, and so to be responsible with the truth that we've been given, I think need to apply ourselves to the teaching of justice. And here's another reason why I think sometimes they're reluctant to do so, is that it isn't always the felt need of the congregation. And that's largely because most of the congregations we're in, there's not people full of people suffering injustice. Because it's interesting, when you are in a congregation of people who are suffering from injustice, that's exactly what people want to hear about. Is there a God of justice? Does he care about this suffering? Does he hear the cry of those who are being oppressed? But our worlds are many times so sheltered from this that it's not the cry of the congregation. But you know what? I think all of us know it's out there in the world. What we are ill prepared for is a way to respond to it when it may leak into our reality, or we don't have an answer for when the people in that world of suffering and hurt ask us why we have no response, why we're disengaged. And then we have maybe a variety of things that we say that sort of change the subject, but we aren't prepared to respond to the actual reality, which is a world that is full of injustice. And are the people of God responding to that reality? The world is looking for a measure of authenticity in our faith. And if our faith can't address the most challenging things in the world, if our faith really only is able to address questions of sort of moderate difficulty, but not the most difficult ones about real suffering and hurt in the world, then I think a lot of people are just going to take a pass on it. I think others are just reluctant to preach about justice because it opens up a door of so much despair, right? It opens up a door of so much darkness. And the essential thing here is to bring forth hope, right? Jesus, he was such an extraordinary first century philosopher because he actually taught that hope was a virtue. And he said that we needed to believe in the God of justice by which we would be equipped to actually enter into the world of injustice and be people of love and care and courage and action. And so we need to be ourselves familiar with and believing with and testifying with our lives to the hope that is in the gospel, so that then we can have a hope that we can actually share with our congregations. My experience has been, as we've gone into churches and preached about the biblical teachings on justice, and especially as we've combined that with testimonies of our own experience of seeing the God of justice active in the world, and the faithfulness of God in leading his people in the work of justice, the kind of reception we get from congregations is overwhelmingly positive. It's almost, well, it is just very palpable, the sense of celebration when we bring this message. And I think that's really based on two things. One is, I think they see this coming together of the truth of the word, of what it is you say is true. In other words, you say there's a God of justice. You say that God is faithful to lead us in the work of justice in the world, but then you actually live as if that were true. And I think people are so discouraged or fearful that it sounds good, the truth sounds good, but I'm not sure they actually think that's true because I don't see them actually acting as if it were true. And so when my colleagues step up in front of a congregation of Christians and tell them a story of how it is they've acted upon this proclaimed truth of God's faithfulness as the God of justice, and then they can see it affirmed in the Scripture, and those two things come together, there's a celebration, because it's a celebration of hope. It's like this really might be true. Because at the end of the day, it also is a release from people's fear. We sit in our pews, honestly, with just lives of great, great fear. Small fears, big fears, and the picture, for just a moment even, of a life that's been liberated from fear because there's a belief that what Jesus said is actually true, that everything is actually well because God is God, He loves us, and He's at work in the world. And to actually see somebody live and act as if that were true, even in the face of the most brutal injustice and the darkest evil, to actually see even a glimpse that that might be true, that we don't have to be afraid, that we can actually go forward totally liberated from fear in the world, even a glimpse of that is a moment of enormous celebration.